My name is Greg Stewart. I'm with the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, and we are the study contractor working with FEMA on updating the flood maps. I'm going to go over the geography, but roughly we're doing Franklin, Orleans County, the Lake Champlain watershed, and Addison County in Otter Creek. So that is the kind of complete study area, but again, I'll go over that in more detail. If you haven't done so already, could you please go in and enter who you are in the chat? So your chat bar may look slightly different than what I've shown here. So please go on, and I'm just making sure everybody that gets on is all set. Please go in and enter your name, your town agency you represent, your position with the town, your email and phone number. If you're in as a multiple group, don't be afraid to allow, put in multiple names on the same chat, just if you're representing the same town or agency. Okay, so once you've all done that, the next thing to let you know, I'm going to continue to mute you throughout the presentation. You'll have an opportunity to unmute at the end if you want to ask a question. But if you do have a question during the meeting, you can post it to the chat, and we will answer those at the end. Not during the meeting, but at the end. So welcome to the Workmap meeting for the Franklin, Orleans County, Vermont, Lake Champlain watershed, Otter Creek, Addison County watershed Workmap meeting. So we have a virtual meeting here today, and I'll be talking about this at the end, but we have the options. If you review your maps and you have questions, want to do a follow-up call, you can set up a breakout session with us either this Thursday, April 10th, or next Wednesday, the 16th. And if we can't find a time to organize that discussion, we can go outside of those days as well. But those are just sort of days where we're going to have FEMA and the state NFIP program staff kind of on call so that we can hopefully answer your questions. So between the USGS as the technical expert, FEMA as the policy guide, and the state as the one that kind of oversees the ordinances and really helps you through the process of adapting and adopting new maps. The thought of the three of us being available to help answer any questions you might have about where we are in the process and what your specific questions are on the maps. We won't be doing the presentation again. That's just to let you know that we'll be offering those breakouts. We did we're kind of in what I'd call the administrative phase of a FEMA flood insurance project. So we've gone through the several different phases. I'm going to show the timeline at some point, but just kind of letting you know where you are is now. We did a discovery meeting back with you several years ago, talking to you about this study, and they vary depending on which county you're in and which when we actually did the meetings. But so we got all your priorities then. We worked with FEMA to kind of come up with a plan on how to attack those priorities. And then now we're at the phase of showing you the work maps. So just kind of an overview of where we are is sort of the four different meetings, the four different times we meet with the town. So we have the first time, which is the discovery meeting again a couple years ago. We're now at a work map phase. The next after this would be the CCO meeting, and then finally the open house and resilience meetings. And to take those meetings and kind of put them into context, looking at the entire project timeline. Now, this is roughly a 5 to 6 year timeline. So in this case, some of these discovery meetings were in 2017, some were in 2019, and then priorities were developed from there. And then all of the technical work was happening in the middle. So we went out and surveyed, we built new hydraulic models, we mapped those models, and built these work maps for us to review here today. So this is highlighted is where we are today, which is the April 2025 work map meeting. And then from here, we'll take in your comments, and then we'll move into our preliminary maps. So that's the first, what you'd consider legal step in the FEMA map process, is those are, they're still not the effective maps, but they're actually a defined product in the process. So, and then after that, we would have the CCO meeting and the appeal period. And then we would, from there, we would have a projected letter of final determination, LFD, and then we'd have the effective date 6 months after that. So the further out in this timeline you go assumes there's not any big problems and assumes there's not any appeals that are going to delay the project. So just kind of gives you a rough sense for where we think the project's going to go at this time. So let's talk about the different study areas and what was done where. So obviously Franklin, Orleans County, if your towns were in here, you got a map update. So all of the communities within both counties were completely updated. So kind of giving you some stats about the area. So, 1,400 square miles, population in 2010 was 75,000. A number of different watersheds go in and out and touch the edges. So it's really tough to kind of calculate what the totals are. So we've got some percentages so you kind of have a different idea of the different reaches. 3,905 catalog river miles. So obviously that does not mean these are all done with brand new detailed studies. I'll get into that a little later, but I just want to give you a sense that 3,905 miles is a lot of river miles, and 971 miles of those reaches are actually named. So there's a lot of reaches where it might be unnamed brook or some small reach. We also did Lake Champlain watershed. So Lake Champlain watershed, again, different than Franklin, Orleans County, is all of the towns. So if your town touched this line, we would have included it. We may not have done all of the panels in your town. So if you're Orwell, there may be some panels over here to the right that we didn't do in this case. But we did do all the panels that touch the red line, which is the watershed boundary. So some stats about the Lake Champlain watershed, 44 different communities, all in Vermont, almost 2,800 square miles, population of 204,000, and 6,573 catalog miles, and then the almost 1,600 named reaches with names. So going down to Addison County, so I talk about Otter in Addison County. So the red line is Otter watershed. So again, it touches the Lake Champlain watershed, but you'll see all of Addison County is highlighted in blue. So if your town is outlined in blue, you were included because you're part of Addison County. If not, you're going to get an update later. So all of your neighboring towns to the south were not invited, but they will be when we do the next update for the southern part of Otter watershed. Some stats about the Otter watershed. There's 51 communities. Again, we're not updating. We're only updating 23 in this call, but we're working on the southern portion as well. 943 square miles, population of 90,000, and 3,000 catalog river miles with 708 miles of named reaches. So that gives you kind of a little bit of a sense of what we were doing. Then the assignments we had, specifically what we did, new detailed reaches, and I'm going to go over this in detail, what this means, but revised new detailed studies for the Missisquoi River was all of the Missisquoi River, so 64.5 miles from the mouth of Lake Champlain up to Highgate, Vermont, with the exclusion of the part that goes into Canada. We don't build floodplains for Canada. We just stop it at the border and then continue it when it comes back into the U.S. Lake Champlain had no new reaches studied, no new detailed studies that were done. So in addition to doing those new detailed studies, there'll also be a DFIRM database. So the database, all of the data underlying will be updated. So when I say things like a detailed Zone AE means it has a BFE, it's a detailed study, and what that means is it has surveying, hydrology, hydraulics, and mapping. New detailed study means that all this is new. So we went out, resurveyed all the cross sections, all the structures, the bridges, the dams, the culverts, and open water river cross sections. Then we did brand new hydrology. Then we put the surveying data into a hydraulic model, entered the hydrology, and ran a brand new hydraulic model. Then that output was mapped on against the high resolution elevation data. So speaking of the LiDAR data, the high resolution elevation data, all the mapping was done on LiDAR. So all of the mapping, the surveying on a detailed study was done with either total station or GPS at even a higher resolution, but all of the mapping is done on the high resolution elevation data collected with LiDAR. For the hydrology, when we computed the hydrology for the Missisquoi River, there's a number of different locations that we shared what the different values were. So the old hydrology from your effective study for the case of above J branch would be 7,800 CFS cubic feet per second. We calculated 9,890 CFS. So this is a 27% increase, and this is all taken from the gauge data. So this calculation was done and computed. It also does include the 2023 July flooding on the Missisquoi River, which wasn't as bad in the Missisquoi as some of the other events as 2011, but it did affect the hydrology slightly. So just so you're kind of aware. Additionally, the hydrology, the open water flooding analysis does not always control or the limiting factor in your base flood elevation. So a complete ice jam analysis was done for all of the Missisquoi River and several locations. The 1% annual exceedance probability or 1% elevation was a combination of ice jam results and open water results. So just to let you know that there are some factors beyond just the hydrology change on the Missisquoi River. So that new hydrology is calculated using peak flow equations for Bulletin 17C, which is the new, what we call the, hydrologist Bible of the process for calculating flow for anywhere between the stream flow gauges that we had to use a proration and use the regression equation. The 2014 regression equation was used. So for the work maps, the maps you're about to see, so there's a base map, and this does vary. So I'm sorry, this may be complicated for some of you because your maps may not all look the same. I've got examples of both versions of maps, but depending on what the status of your maps were, whether your maps were paper maps or whether and you were considered a non-digital county, or whether you had actual digital conversion maps. So most of the images here will be on the digital conversion maps, and then I'll talk about the few of you that had the paper version of the maps and what those look like. So there's a slight difference, but overall they're all going to be basically the same, is that we take the old map as the background. So whatever your existing effective map is, whatever your maps are right now today, those are the background. So that's what's in behind. So when you say, hey, wait a minute, this road is not there anymore, well, that might be those old maps, maybe 20, 30, or even 40 years old. So it's quite possible they are. We will be putting these on new imagery. So they will be on updated maps when you get to the prelim phase. But for the work maps, we want you to look at your old maps versus these new proposed changes. So that's why we plot them up and show them the way they are. So all of the new floodplains are transparent solid colors. So you'll see cross sections, baselines. Again, I've got some images showing these. But again, the imagery underneath and the roads are not correct. The old cross-section letters and all of the labels are going to be there so you can see them. So again, the goal of this is for you to compare your current effective maps with these new floodplains with new elevations. So we have a lot of people that say, well, these don't look like, why didn't you put them on the new aerial imagery? We're going to for the preliminary map. But this just gives you a sense a lot of people know what their effective maps look like. They're really well versed. That's why we're presenting them to the towns. You have all of the local knowledge. So there's a lot of people in your situation have that knowledge about what your maps really look like now. So the idea is we put new floodplains on top to show you where they've changed and hopefully to be able to highlight that. So this key is on all of the map, this legend, but just to let you know, kind of the difference. So this is the proposed study. So again, everything is solid shaded. So solid blue is zone A, solid green is AE. The stripes, the new stripes is going to be the floodway. Those are going to be primarily what you're going to be seeing. Yellow's a structure, the baseline's in blue, and any new cross sections are in red. All of the old stuff is kind of, let's say, darker and grayer, with the only exception of the blue. So the blue lines, again, showing you the extent of the floodplain, they're all either dotted, or the other floodplains, the older floodplains, the paper versions, look like this with the black and white dots with no shading at all. Again, I've shot examples of all of these. So here's an example map where, just to kind of get you oriented. So, again, starting off, this is the effective map. So what you see underneath is the effective map. So you'll see this blue line with the blue dots. That's the old floodplain. Again, so yes, the green is over the top of it, but the blue with the dots is underneath. So, and then the green, the shaded green, is the new floodplain. So that's where the floodplain has been expanded. This is a case where you have a new study. So you have the blue line with new cross sections all the way through, with the old AF cross section, AE cross section with the black. So the old cross sections were here, and here our new cross sections are all of the blue lines. The elevations for those blue lines would be in red. The elevations for the old study are in black. So again, you'll see the right here between 45.5 and 45.3. The old elevation was 41. So in this example, the new base flood elevation would be 4 feet higher, or 4.4 feet higher approximately between these two. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Again, I've got some more examples, but I'm just trying to ground truth everybody into what the basic map looks like before we go into some of the other examples. Again, effective map is in the background. Floodway down through the middle, and there's old and new floodways. Old floodplain is dotted, the new floodplain is green. So hopefully that makes sense. And the structures are going to be in yellow. The yellow lines will be for structures. So here's a second example of a new detailed reach, where again the elevations may, in this case, 54 and 54, the elevations match pretty well, 54 and 53.2, so the elevations are lining up. And then all of a sudden, if you get up higher, the elevations are 55, and oh wait, they're 59.9. So, prior to this structure, they lined up reasonably well, and then after this structure, the numbers jumped up quite a bit. So the new floodplain would be quite a bit higher. Even though the elevation's higher, you'll see here the floodplain is slightly smaller. So that could be in errors in the old mapping on the old topography. So again, trying to look at these maps takes you a minute. So don't rush it. Take your time, look at the key, even, sketch out some numbers for yourself and be like, okay, the new floodplain is green, the old floodplain is black. What is the difference? This one's even more complicated because the orange you see here is the 500 year. So it's an updated 500 years. So it's the new 500-year floodplain. So again, these can be kind of complicated examples. So what changed on your map, in addition to detailed mapping, is the zone A's. So all of your zone A's, or approximate zones, all of them, I'm going to say that more than once to make sure you remember that one word, all zone A's are updated, all of them. So all of your old floodplains, they're not thrown away, they're just set off to the side for a minute, and we develop all new floodplains. Brand new. So we use what's called base level engineering. So we did this by using some approximate methods. So no surveying is actually done. So structures are not considered. They're not a factor in this. But new hydrology is calculated. The new hydraulic models are built, and then those results are then mapped. Everything is mapped on the LiDAR data. But again, just to emphasize that these are all new. So it's brand new engineering behind all of these. So again, we do bring up the old ones and do a comparison and try to see if there was any errors or mistakes. But the bottom line is these are new. So I'm going to give you an example of one of what it might look like. So here's a unique example where the old floodplain may have stopped at maybe a community boundary or something like that. But again, to the right is just a zoom in of what you see to the left, which is again just seeing that now the floodplain is going to be connected, following the streamline. You'll see the shapes are very, very different. There's a lot of back and forth in and outs as the topography changes. But those we're finding are going to be much better because of that new topography underneath. It really updates and changes what you're going to see. So again, all Zone A reaches. Zone A's do not have BFEs. There's no base flood elevation published on them. The only defining feature is the line itself. Okay, so that's just to make sure to be clear about that. And they are all new. So just trying to make sure that everybody remembers that piece. So I'm going back to detailed studies for a minute. Now, this is what is a redelineation? Well, this is where we didn't update the engineering. So we didn't change any of the base flood elevations. Nothing. We did remap the floodplain based on the LiDAR data. So we redrew everything, but we didn't change any of the base flood elevations. So all of the remaining effective Zone AEs, the elevations all stayed the same, but the watershed boundary, the floodplain would actually be adjusted and moved. So here's an example where there's a new detail to the left. Okay, this reach is brand new. So all these are new BFEs. And then here's this other tributary coming in from right to left, which is a redelineation. And you'll see the redelineation where the dotted, sometimes the green goes past and sometimes the blue dotted kind of goes past, and as it switches back and forth. But the thing to key in on is the elevation up here is 32, the elevation's 32. The elevation down here is 27, the elevation is 27. The elevation down here is 27, the elevation is 27. So the elevations aren't changed, 29, 30, 32. Those stay the same. The cross sections stay the same. There's no new engineering behind it. It's just remapped. So the changes are going to mostly happen from the cross section to the cross section where that new LiDAR topography was used to develop those new floodplains. So I'm just going to kind of go over this one more time so you kind of get, there's 3 different types of mapping. There's the Zone AE new detailed reach. So the Missisquoi River was the big one in this study. New surveying, new hydraulic model with new hydrology plugged in. And then all of that is mapped with those red lines and the blue numbers with very, very clear new locations of everything. Redelineated reaches, no new engineering, no new cross sections, just remapped on new topography. So all the BFEs stay the same on those reaches. Then there's the Zone A's, again, all new. So new engineering, new hydrology and hydraulic models, new mapping. So all new. So things not changed. Zone AEs, coastal doesn't impact you guys. But also sometimes if the floodplain didn't change, there's some issues with neighboring panels. So if there was no changes to the floodplain or there was no floodplain on a panel, we're not going to update that panel. So that can be a little bit strange at times, just so you kind of, if you get into it. And then, so all features outside the watershed boundary were not changed as well. So except if the floodplain did actually go over a watershed boundary. So again, the watershed boundary, we put them on there as pink so they would kind of stand out. So just think of one side of it is within the watershed of study, one side was outside. So a total of 354 panels were updated in Addison County, Chittenden. Those are just the numbers. So you can kind of take a look at how many panels were updated in all of the different counties. So, and everything is going to get published by county. So it's not by town, it's by county now. So all the towns, all the counties will be updated entirely. Or at least the panels that touch the watershed, but only those panels that again, for like Otter, I showed you like Addison County, we're doing almost all the panels in Addison County, but there's a whole nother piece that's going to be going later. So go back to what I said earlier as far as the reach boundaries as what the limits is. Some other nuances, adjacent panels don't always show up on all four sides of these work maps, and that can confuse people. There's reasons when you hit county boundaries, there's strange lines. So if you have a floodplain boundary that hits a county line, I've got a couple of examples of these so you can kind of see them. And zone A's that were terminated at the community boundaries now extend to natural breaks or confluences. So there shouldn't be any weird stoppages except at the county boundaries. So here's an example where you may have a county boundary here, so no, the floodplain's not extended, but also you'll see this floodplain down the south end actually goes through now. It doesn't stop anymore. But you'll see there's a panel missing to the side. Well, that's because it's either number one, an unpublished panel, or there's no changes to the panel. So we're not updating that panel, so it's not included. So, but there's also a number of panels that are not published. Then again, I mentioned the pink line, so you can kind of think about the floodplain boundary. So the floodplain boundaries, in this case, the floodplain boundaries extends, but on the work maps, it won't show you that because of the county boundary. So this pink line, the floodplain should not extend over the pink line. That's the watershed boundary. In other words, if a drop of water falls on the north side of this line, the water will run this way. If a drop of water falls on the south side of this line, the water will run this way. So that's a watershed divide where you shouldn't have water or floodplains moving back and forth. But in this case, the yellow line is an artificial corporate boundary that stops the floodplain. It exists. We have this other panel, we have this other piece that's going to be published with the other county. It's just to let you know that it will look weird if you ever see these yellow lines at the county boundaries. It could be kind of strange if the floodplain stops. And just an example of the Zone A extension where, again, the floodplain you can see used to stop at the community boundary, which makes no hydrology sense. The floodplain just shouldn't stop like that. So now you'll see the new one, again, the dotted is the old and the shaded is the new. So the new one will extend into the new study. So I've got a whole list of contacts here. Your Vermont state contacts are listed, FEMA contacts are listed. Scott Olson and myself are the project leads. So send any comments to me and also include Melissa, please, and CC Colleen Bailey, who's our primary FEMA contact. So if you have comments, we'll be reaching out with an email to kind of confirm if you attended this meeting and we've got your contact info. Just to let you know, you don't have to have comments, but if you do, again, you've got all the local knowledge. We're trying to tap into that and see if there's anything that you have concerns about before we move forward with the preliminary phase of the project. So again, contacts list. This will actually we'll have the presentation, the recording of the presentation, and the contact list as a separate saved item on our SharePoint site. So all of the things you would want, including the maps, are going to be on the SharePoint site. So for other resources, the FEMA mapping, like a letter of map change, you can call the FEMA exchange or go to the FEMA map specialist at the riskmapcds.com. The map service center. So again, none of this will be up on the map service center yet. This will be on our SharePoint site. The hope is that we can get these up on the map service center, but I know there's been problems with getting work maps posted there. So it's likely we'll have to pull them from our SharePoint site. And then there's a National Flood Insurance Program phone number and the floodsmart.gov website, which has a lot of good flood information. And then additional, like the draft work maps, this is where you can find them, is at the SharePoint site. We're looking for comments due back in roughly 5 weeks. So if you've got any comments and people ask, like, how do I get you the comments? However, it's easy for you. You can take a picture of the map. You can, you could circle, just say the panel number, what stream reach, what you have a question or issue about, concern about. Again, just remember the old floodplain maps, the old effective maps are underneath. So road name changes, things like that really aren't important at this time. It's really more looking at the floodplains and the difference in the floodplains and seeing if there's areas that don't make sense to you because you've got that local knowledge. But again, you can't put these maps up on the web page. They're not for public view. These are work maps, which are intended to be a work product for you to communicate with us your local knowledge. So what is it you know about the maps that you might find, hey, these are going to be coming. These are the floodplains we plan on using. Do you see any issues? Do you see any problems? Do you have any concerns? So those kind of things are really kind of what we're looking for is any of that local knowledge you might have. So next I've got a step-by-step set of instructions once you're into our SharePoint system of how to find our actual maps. So if you go, you get our general link to our SharePoint site, and then you go to general, good place to start. And then you go to meetings. So meetings is where you're going to find all of your data, and you go to this actual meeting, which is today, which is 2025-04-08, which is the date. And then it's Franklin, Orleans, and Lake Champlain, and it keeps going. This is a very long title. But all you got to do is click on that link to the left. So, but that's what you're looking for. And then from there, you're going to go to maps. I'm assuming you want the maps. You might want the presentation. You may want the handout. But if you want to get to your maps, this is where you'd go to get maps. In the maps folder, there's two different pieces. And I highlighted these and separated them because if you know GIS and you know geospatial, you may want to look at the spatial maps, and that may make it a lot easier. If you don't know GIS and you're a fan of paper maps, then you want to go to the PDFs. So, because any Adobe Reader program can open those maps and you can view them. So again, if you know GIS and you want the geospatial files, they're right there. But if you want the PDFs, they're here. And once you click on that, then you say, okay, let's, for example, I'm in Franklin County. So you have to go to Franklin County, click on the link. Now for Franklin County, you'll see all of the map panels, but maybe you don't remember exactly what map panels your town had updated. So that's where you'd go to the community compilation and you'd say, oh, I want to go to the community compilation. Then you might say, okay, I'm the city of St. Albans, or I'm the town of Fairfax. And you say, then you click on that and all of your maps are in one PDF file. Again, this is if you wanted to go to the PDF files, not the geospatial files. And then just note, I noted in here just that all of the indexes are in here just to help you out. So if you get confused and sometimes you may be a regional planner, or you may work for more than one town, or all those kind of things can kind of happen. The hope is that you can help yourself find the maps. But if you go to the specific town, you should see all of the panels that were updated in your town. So most towns are going to see pretty much town-wide updates here, but there are a few towns out there that only part of your town was done because of a watershed boundary. Like I said, Lake Champlain and Otter Creek, only part of your towns were done. Franklin and Orleans, your entire town. If you're in Franklin or Orleans, your entire towns were updated. So I promised a few examples of non-digital maps. So if you have a non-digital map, you have a paper map, and that's all that exists. What we did was take the scan of those paper maps and put those in the background and turn them to black only. And then we took the newer ortho photo and put it about a 50% transparency. So you can kind of see like the roads and the layouts, but you'll see these black lines, and I've got a zoom in of this. So you can kind of look at it and see the old roads this is the new roads layer. But I want you to see, this is an example of what I call a bad paper map. So it could have been from rubber sheeting, some other geospatial process, but the bottom line is this gray area up here is the floodplain, and it's in the wrong place. Like, that's not where the stream is. The stream is way down here where the new floodplain is. And then you'll see it aligns down at the southern end, but this where it crosses the stream. So for some reason, this stream is not aligned where it's supposed to be aligned. So that'll really throw things off a little bit. But unfortunately, that's your effective product. So we can't change that. That's your effective map, and it's geospatially rectified wrong. So when we correct it, the new floodplain's in the correct place, and you'll see that it matches up really well with the ortho photo underneath. So again, this is the best we could come up with to try to show you the difference. But again, this is a bad example, so this is kind of a good example. A little bit busy here, but what you'll see is the streamline is in the same spot. There's some small changes to the floodplain, but that's based on topography. For the most part, it lines up pretty well. So most of the time it's going to work okay for you. Occasionally, if you see those streams like not quite in the right spots, that's because of those paper products were never georectified quite the same way. So they're not going to align perfectly. But there's not too many of those areas, but there are some. So just be kind of wary of that. So the last thing I'll go over is our optional breakout sessions. The idea is to provide you an opportunity to review your map, make your comments, send those back to us. But also, if you have specific questions you want to go over with us, let us know and we'll schedule a breakout session with you. We're not going over this presentation again. That's not the intent. The intent is that you have an opportunity to kind of go over where your issues are. So we usually break them up in 1 hour blocks. Doesn't mean we have to talk for an hour, but it just means we set them as 1 hour time slots. So if you've got any interest in doing a breakout, once you've looked at your maps and you're like, hey, this really doesn't make sense to me, I need some clarification, let us know. Give us a few times on the 10th and the 16th that work for you, because we have other people competing for those times and we'll work with it. Melissa's going to be coordinating all of that. And we will have breakout meetings again for specific towns if anybody requests it. So if you did not see my directions at the beginning, I'm going to go over them again. Again, go to the chat bar on the top. Again, your Teams bar may look differently. Go to the chat button. Enter your name, the town, city, agency you represent, your position, your email, your phone number. Please make sure you hit the submit button. That's always an easy one to forget. I know I do it all the time. And then if you are on the phone and we need your contact info, you can unmute yourself. Sometimes you have to hit *6 to unmute. Sometimes you can just unmute by depending on how your phone connected, whether you're calling through an app or whether you're calling through an actual like landline, you'd have to hit *6. So I'm looking in the chat for any questions. Going to the bottom first. Yes, the breakout sessions are this Thursday and next Wednesday. It doesn't mean those are the only times. It just means we've already kind of told FEMA and told the state NFIP staff those are the dates. So we've asked them to kind of have somebody available. And the hope is that, if you met just with us and you had a question about the ordinance or a question about a policy, those aren't questions that we can answer. Those are questions, FEMA would answer the policy question and the state would probably answer the ordinance question. So the hope is that we'd have somebody there to answer your questions. So that's sort of the reasoning for that breakout. So will the discharge estimates reported by the gauge stations on the Missisquoi change with the updated hydrology? They did. So the discharge has been updated. It's been finalized, and the new hydrology for the Missisquoi does include it. Yeah, if you're on our risk. Oh, sorry. Somebody have a question?
Hi, Greg. This is Rebecca Pfeiffer. I'm the Vermont State NFIP coordinator. One of the questions that was asked earlier in the chat, which I think folks are looking for, is the link to the SharePoint site, if that could be posted in the chat. So I think people then could try to walk through downloading the maps now while we're still on.
Well, we try, one of the strange things, oops, sorry, I got a lot of things open here. One of the strange things we do is historically for prelim maps, you get your maps 30 days in advance. For the work maps, we've posted them ahead of time before, but we end up with a phenomenal amount of questions about what I just went over. So what we've tried to do is say, well, let's post the maps right after the meeting. So you can get into the SharePoint right now, but obviously I haven't put the recording of the presentation in there yet. And the maps, actually, I think the maps are in there right now. But let me open this up and give you the link in the chat. And there are people that are going to have problems with the SharePoint access. This is an IT problem. It is a two-factor authentication, especially if you have like a Gmail account and a town account. it can get really weird because it tries to authenticate. And if you're not logging in with the right account, it's trying to authenticate the other one. It'll say like, nope, you got a mismatch. You can't get in. This is an IT security problem. It's been happening for not quite a year, but it was last summer that they kind of implemented this two-factor authentication. It's similar to what you find with online banking and other things, but the banks obviously do a better job than the government when it comes to security. We're very good at locking people out, it seems. Not intentionally, but we find a lot of times it has to do with the fact that you have two different accounts on that email or in that computer, or you haven't done an update or a patch in the security side then it won't let you in. Yeah, so if you've never requested access, hit the request access button. It should be there. If not, I will post Melissa's email. Can I grab that for me? I don't think so. You can send Melissa an email and she can grant you access. That's usually the easiest way. And if you've ever had access in the past and you don't have it now, you have to make sure to let us know that because we have to go to our headquarters IT people. So once you get access, you have 60 days. And if you go inactive for 60 days, it locks you out. But you actually still exist in the system. So we have to go and send a request to headquarters to get unlocked. We just had one of the FEMA staff have that exact problem and we just got him unlocked. So, but it takes a separate email. We have to know that before we submit it. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, so if you have, oh, yes.
Yeah, I won't be shy. I've asked a couple of times in the chat about the GIS data and when it would be uploaded.
Everything will be uploaded. Everything will be available today. So we have it all ready. We just kind of don't post it to the link because we don't want people cheating. I shouldn't say it like that. It's not like we care if you look at it early, but it's amazing how many questions we get that the hope is the presentation answers those questions. So unlike the prelim maps that you're going to get 30 days in advance, because those are traditional floodplain maps. So those are kind of what you're expecting is brand new maps. And those will replace your effective maps. These are very different because again, it's the new floodplains on the old maps with the hope is that a single product would show you kind of the differences. So you'd be able to kind of dial in and take a look at those. So everything will be available right after this meeting. Catherine's probably on, maybe opening the link right now. So we have all of the data uploaded. We're just gonna basically flip a switch and make it accessible. And the recording will take me maybe, 20 minutes or half an hour. We can post the presentation, but the recording has to come back to me in Teams and then I have to give it the permissions and then share it. So I will stop recording in case somebody's shy but still wants to ask a question. They don't have